honor to introduce our next keynote speaker, and Mr. Alexander Cheng. Here he is. Alex received his MBA from Louisiana State University. I'm going to ignore the year, okay? He began his career with KPMG after graduate school and received his CPA the following year. In 1995, he started his own accounting practice in Chapel Hill. And after 13 years with KPMG and 9 years as a director of finance with Caltex Petroleum, a joint venture of Chevron and Texaco. And after building a successful practice with 4 offices from Cary to Charlotte, Mr. Cheng sold his firm in 2006 and shifted his focus to investment banking and management of private equity funds. Currently, his funds invest predominantly in multifamily apartments. Today, his firm manages over $800 million in real estate assets, delivering over 20% per year. That's pretty good return to his investors based on his last 5 years average. It is our pleasure to have him today to share his insight on investment in real estate through private equity. And please give a warm welcome to Mr. Alex Cheng.
Thank you. A lot of familiar faces, and it's my pleasure to be a keynote speaker in such a great organization. So you just heard very, very in-depth knowledge, information about how to invest with your real estate with a very personal, I would say, banker. Kyle did a great job, and well, I'm here to discuss a little bit of finance. Okay, so basically, there's 2 ways to invest in real estate. One is, which is the most common way, is you save up some money, you win the lottery, somehow you find all these money in your bank account. And you decide that real estate is the way to go, which it is. And you decide to either get a rental properties, like a residential, or you can go into commercial. So once you decide, then you go to the bank, and like most state bank, okay, talk to informative gentleman like Kyle, and he guides you properly, and you start investing. So you got your first property, got your second property, and then so forth. So you're doing very well. You're very happy with your return. Okay. The second way to invest is what I'm going to introduce. Is the first model is a great model to make money, except one thing, right? It's too much work. Okay. Now I don't know about you guys, but I'm lazy. All right. I'm an old man too, so I'm getting more lazy. So I don't want to keep working. Okay. So how can I tap into the knowledge of somebody else and help me invest so I become a passive investor? So that's the key word. Okay. So the first model is you are, relatively speaking, an active investor. What does an active investor do? You go find your property. Okay. Hopefully you find the right one. Then you find your money, which you get from North State Bank. Then you find your tenant. Hopefully they'll pay your rent on time too, okay? So with all these assumptions, then you still have to work on that, right? You have to go find the property, get the loan, get the tenant. They do pay you, and they will eventually leave, and you find another tenant, and so forth. So now the property is not going to last forever, just like your cars or anything else. So they break down. So you need your tenant call you, I got a plumbing problem, I got a roofing problem, I got a flooring problem, okay? So now you have to go maintain or service these things. You have to find the plumber, the electrician, the roofer. So these are works, okay? Works that I personally prefer not to do, okay? And I'm sure there are some people in this room probably prefer not to do either. But you do like to tap into the wealth of a commercial property or a single-family rental house. So how do we accomplish that? That's what we're going to talk about today. It's called private equity. I'm sure you all heard about private equity. And private equity actually started as not a real estate-centric investment vehicle. Private equity started as a leveraged buyout company, right? So like KKR, you probably heard about it. Okay, these are all private equity funds. They pull investors' money, they will do a leveraged buyout. And they'll buy a company, and they'll strip their assets, sell some of them, and then they will maximize the assets value, and then they sell it. Okay, so that's what private equity started. But over the years, private equity started to also go into real estate. Now, real estate is a relatively conservative investment. Right? The corporate raiders, like what KKR did, and today they're doing that too, okay, in a different company. I think they're the force behind the Walgreens buyout too, I believe it was KKR. So that's a more aggressive move. As opposed to real estate funds, we don't do that kind of thing. We're very boring funds. Okay? We do very traditional, repetitive, cookie cutter type deals. Okay, so let's talk about how do we do that. Okay, so we talk about the traditional approach, okay, which is called direct ownership. And that's a very important concept because when you purchase a rental house, a commercial building, a warehouse, you own this building. You may have partners, but you basically is a direct owner. Okay? If you choose the private equity approach, you don't own that building. You own a fraction of the building. So it is indirect ownership. Think about a mutual fund. Okay? So many people here invest in stock. So there's the same way. There's two ways to invest in stock. You can go to the market. You can go sign up with one of the brokerage house and start trading, right? You can be a day trader, you can be a long-term trader, you can be a 401k trader, but you're a trader. You decide the destiny of your money, all on your own, at your own risk, right? Or you can join Vanguard, become a mutual fund. So you buy a mutual fund. So you don't really know where your money is invested. You don't know if you bought Tesla yesterday or Amazon 2 years ago, right? Because you are a fractional owner of that fund. So you do get a statement, somehow you do know where you invest, but you don't make decisions. You don't call Vanguard and say, hey, I think Tesla's going to go up, let's go buy some Tesla. You don't do that. And if you do, they won't listen to you anyway. Okay? So that's the difference between direct ownership and indirect, and the same thing here with real estate. Okay, so what is a private equity? A private equity is basically a partnership. Okay? In the private equity structure, there's two distinct roles. There's general partners, or we call them GPs, and limited partners, which we call them LPs. Okay, so what's the difference? Okay, here's the difference. Think about an airplane. I'm the one that bought the airplane. I pay for it. It was my plane. But I'm not a pilot. I can't fly. So what do? I bring in a pilot. Say, you fly this airplane, but I will pay for it. I'm the LP who bought the airplane. You're the GP who decide if this airplane is going to crash. Okay? So it's very important, right? So you don't make decisions because as an airplane owner, in my example, you don't tell the pilot how to take off or land. Okay? You can decide where you want to fly to because it's a rich route, but you don't actually do the day-to-day work and you don't make that decision. So that's the difference between the GP and LP. Okay? So it's a fractional hands-off ownership, we just talk about it, or we call it indirect property ownership. Okay? So the privacy is a different class of a pooled private investment. So that's another difference, is the same example as I just used in a mutual fund. Okay? You pulling the fund to buy a different properties. Right? As opposed to you bought 1,000 shares of Apple, you bought a fraction of many different stock. It's a pool of stock in mutual fund. Same thing in real estate. So the private equity may end up on different assets, right, with your money. but you own a fraction of it, right? So in the mid-90s, when the property value started falling, you know, there was a lot of ups and downs, right? We all seen that. Of course, the most noted was the last recession, 2008, where the market crashed, right? So over a certain cycle, people realize, hey, maybe it's better to let the professional manage my money. So that's when the private equity fund also get into real estate. It's a long-term investment, higher return, and of course, high or low is all relative. So 8 to 10 is actually the old number. Like our firm delivers a lot higher return than that. Okay? So the second thing is the skin in the game. So the difference between my earlier example of a pilot and an airplane owner is, in this case, the pilot actually owns a small portion of the airplane. So he does not want to crash the plane, other than the fact he does want to live, okay? So he has a skin in the game. So the GP or general partners in a private equity real estate fund does put their money in the pot, okay? However, the role of a general partner is not the capital provider. You didn't go to the GP and say, hey, I need money. If you need money, you go to the limited partner, because they're the one that has money. So there's two people distinguished role. The GP has talent because he, she, they can collectively be smarter than you on this subject because they have the resource to do the research, they have the connection with different banks to get the financing done at a lower cost. He knows how to manage, he knows when to sell. And so there's called access strategy, which is also very important. So, so you didn't go to GP for money, you go to GP for talent, okay? Now, it's a good marriage because GP has all the talent in the world, but is not a very rich person. He's a smart guy, has no money. So he needs your money as LPs or limited partner to make his talent work. On the other hand, the LP has all the money in the world, but he can't deliver the return that the GP can help him get. So that's why it's a good marriage, okay? In every business entity, the partners have to all serve a purpose, okay? If I don't need you, you won't be my partner. Because I don't need you, why do I bring in? Partner shares profit, okay? So everyone have to serve a purpose. So the type of risk investment, you know, there's different classes, which a lot of you already know. There's office building, there's industrial, there's retail, there's multifamily. Now, in my 20 years of being a private equity fund, mostly we invest in the multifamily. So I will probably talk a little bit more about that. The other asset classes, I'm not as familiar, but the principle of running a private equity is the same. So a limited partner in a PE fund, right? The big difference is you, as a limited partner, put up a majority, a super majority of the money. So if I need $100 to invest, I am the GP, only put up $1, maybe $5. 10 is like really high. So $90 to $99 is from the limited partners, right? So the limited partner put up all the money, or almost all the money, but make no decision. Zero. You have zero decision-making power. You have the power. You only have the right to know, but you don't have the power to decide what to do. This is exactly the same as mutual fund. You don't tell Vanguard which stock to buy because you trust them. They have track record, right? So it's exactly the same in the private equity. It's your money, but you cannot decide what to do. Right? So if you want to even consider investing, you have to get over that hump. A lot of people don't feel comfortable, and I don't blame you. Then you're not suitable for that. Then you should trade your own stock, don't go to a mutual fund either, because it's exactly the same. So that's the investor's mentality has to be understand. So the trade-off, okay, when do you want to consider investing, right? Because when you're investing in the real estate fund like this, you tap into a wealth of resources. The resources are mostly, for example, do I invest in Raleigh or New York? Or should I go to San Francisco or Denver? Is Las Vegas really a hot market? How hot is it? How long is it going to be hot? These are the information which you individually may or may not have the ability to get that information. And also to get those information, typically you have to pay a very large fee to subscribe to certain research, such as in our firm we use a software called Axiometrics, okay, which some of you may be familiar with it. These software costs somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 a year just in subscription. Now, since I'm running $800 million, that's well worth it. But if I'm running a $3 million fund, then it's not worth it, or asset. So individually, you may or may not be able to do it, or may not be able to justify that. So the advantage, right? You get an exposure to the multiple and the different class of assets. Right? So we will present to you a different type of investment opportunity. Right? You get the appreciation of the real estate, infraction. Right? Manage the risk, which we would talk about earlier. Right? The big thing is headache. We talked about that earlier. Headache is, stress is number one killer. Not heart attack, all right? Not cancer, it's stress. So look at this guy, poor thing, I don't know where my assistant found this picture, probably was one of my staff. But anyway, okay, so no headache. You don't have the day-to-day maintenance issue. You don't have to worry about a tenant. You don't have to worry about the compliance. There's all kinds of fire code, there's all kinds of regulations. The disclosure requirement, the EEOC issues, there are equal housing issues, even though as individual, some of you are exempt from those compliance, but still, these are the things you may think about. Okay? So I'm tired of looking at this guy. All right, so it's a passive investment, and the second thing is a long-term. So let's define long-term. Long-term is 1 year or more, that's all. So it's not like you have to stick in there for 5, 10 years. But also at the same time, if you want to consider private equity investment, you have to forego immediate liquidity. Okay? Private equity is a closed-end fund. You cannot sell your share to an outside person. You can sell your share to anyone you want. That's, some equities are tradable, and if you need money, you can go find someone to buy. But the fund does not have to redeem your share. So it's not a redeemable share. So when you put the money in the real estate fund, typically the fund will tell you, called a capital horizon. Like in our fund, we typically tell investor 3 to 5 years. That's our capital horizon. We're not the long-term holder. We don't hold something for 5, 10 years, right? But we also are not merchant builder. Merchant builder is one that build and then they sell right away. They don't even bother to rent it, right? So we're the in-between guy. We're the build, stabilize, and sell guy. In that cycle, in multifamily typically takes 36 to 60 months, depending on the market and other conditions. So it is a long-term investment with no immediate liquidity. So what's the benefit of private equity? Right? Yeah, you can check your private equity management past performance record. You know your capital horizon, and you know the management fee that has to be fully disclosed, right? And the type of assets. So for example, we talk about type of assets. There is fund that invests specifically in warehouses, which is called industrial. There are funds specifically invest in hotel, which is called hospitality. There's funds specifically invest in a shopping center, which is called a retail. So if you like certain class of assets, you can pick those funds, even though you don't know which assets specifically the fund invests, but at least you know your money is in hotel, your money is in retail. Professional management, we talk about that, we evaluate, and we have a certain acquisition process. The acquisition process in commercial property especially can be very tedious and complicated. Right? Anyone that have done this before know you have a relatively long due diligence period, right? Somewhere between 60, 90 days to 2 years, right? Depending on the readiness of the property. So during that due diligence period, you have to really do your due diligence. Right? Like Carl said earlier, and very correctly, if it doesn't smell right, walk away. Right? So when you walk away during that due diligence period, or that little walk away is going to cost you money. Right? So the process of acquisition in a commercial property is quite different than a traditional residential where you just make an offer, you go get a loan and you close. Okay? The investment, the property management, the bookkeeping, which also involves tax. The relationship. Once you become a member, you also know, remember, even though, I said earlier, even though you cannot make any decision, but you have the right to know. So you know everything, or you get the reports periodically, so you know who you're investing, you know who is the lender, who is lending the money. So that way you can become part of a network. Okay. Also, you have access to the talent that we talk about. Right? Upfront costs. Right? The commercial property has a very large upfront cost. Right? The due diligence costs money. In order for you to run through the county to see if you get approved, you have to get architect involved, and you have to get attorneys involved. You have to get a lot of people involved. So these cost money. But these upfront costs is all disclosed to you in the private equity. The access to substantial financing, that's a very, very important element, because individually, it is very difficult to get a large-scale financing. And let me define large-scale. I'm normally talking about 10 millions and up. Right? So if you have a professional management team running a private equity fund, the bank is more likely to loan you a large sum of money. Okay? A lot of times we can get non-recourse. So for those who are not familiar with the term, that means you're not personally liable. Okay? The project stands on its own foot. So the project shows the return, the property shows the potential equity and the growth, so they don't need your personal guarantee. Right? Those are difficult to get if you're not a collective fund. Some funds are need-based investment, which means you can commit to a certain amount, but you can pay the money when the capital calls come. So that's kind of a little bit different type of investment, so we're not going to go there too much. So I did get a case study, but I don't want to turn this into a math class. Okay, it was boring. You guys just eat. Okay, so I'm going to make it real quick. Okay, this is example, and I will send these slides to anyone that wants. Okay, just send me your email, and I will send it to you. So you don't have to make notes if you don't want to. But this is the example of a $50 million project. Right? We want to use this example to illustrate several basic elements. Not all properties or projects involve this many elements, but there's two fundamental sources of money. One is called equity, one is called debt. So remember, whatever you do, your own house, you have debt and equity. Also, okay, you bought a house for $500,000. The bank said, hey, you put down 20%, I'll loan you the rest, because you're a good guy, you have good credit, good income. Okay, so that 20% or 100,000 in this example is your equity. That's your house, right? And the bank come in and give you 400,000. It's called a debt, right? Debt has interest. Equity carries a opportunity cost, which means what if I don't put 100,000 on the house? I could have earned a certain amount of money as opportunity cost. So in the equity, we have a GP and LP split. So in this example, you can see the GP is only putting 10% of the equity. So out of the 12 million, he's putting 1 million, okay? And then the LP for the rest of the bill. Now, on the debt side, I break it down to senior and mass. For those who doesn't know what mezzanine loan is, it's similar to a second mortgage of your house, if you want to think that way. Right? So typically you get a senior debt and then you have a mass loan if needed. Right? Now, of course, you get enough senior debt, you may or may not need a mass loan. Mass loan is typically very high cost, very complicated, so it's something, me personally, I like to avoid. Okay? So now, how does LP make money? So the LP's profit is split with general partner. General partner did all the work. He or she or they come in with talent. They have to be rewarded. So how do they get rewarded? They get part of your profit. You cannot say, look, GP, you only put in 10% of the equity, so only get 10% return. Well, that's not fair, because GP not only put in 10% of money, he brought a talent. The talent have to worth something, okay? So typically, we run a hurdle. And in this example, of course, there are many, many different ways they can do the split, okay? But typically, you can give a preferred return. In this example, I use 8%, which is pretty high. But what that means is the first 8% of profit goes 100% to the LP. So if let's say I'm GP and you guys are LP, I took your money and I cannot deliver you more than 8%. Basically, I don't deserve to be paid. Because you could do that on your own. You could go a lot of places and get 8%, okay? So I start getting paid after the 8%. So the first tier is called a preferred tier. The second and third is called a hurdle. The hurdle means once, okay, so now I'm a little bit smarter because I do deliver more than 8%, but how smart I am, how good I am. I'm good, but how good I am. Okay, so the first hurdle is 12% in this example. That means anything beyond 8 to 12%, you, the LP, get 70, I get 30% of the profit. Okay? If I can deliver you over 15 or 16%, then I'm really good. Or if I'm so good, I deserve to pay more, get paid more. So now I'm splitting with you at 50-50. Right? So this is actually an actual case, so it does happen. But there's many different ways to do it. Right? So this is a typical 3-year exit plan. Right? So in the exit plan, we describe the property. So we have 300,000 square feet of rentable space. That's apartment. Okay, each apartment is average about 1,000 nowadays. So that's 300 units, pretty typical. Right? The rent per square foot is $1.20. That's fairly common in the market, like Raleigh and Charlotte. So the annual rental income is 120 times 300 times 12. Right? Now we can never reach 100% full, so we have occupancy at exit of 94%. And so we calculate the net operating income to be such. And exit cap rate is 5.5. And Kyle just explained a little bit about a cap rate. So cap rate, the lower the cap rate, the higher the property value, okay, based on a constant net operating income, or NOI. So the exit value is $53.9 million. Let's just say it's $54 million. Right? So now we have a capital gain of about $4 million because we're 50 in, 54 out. Okay. If anyone asks where is interest, all interest in the first 3 years are capitalized, which means it's part of that $50 million budget we saw earlier. The total project cost, including a capitalized interest. So the interest is already part of it. the rental income is 18 months ramped up. Typically for a 300-unit apartment, it takes us 18 months to build. The other 18 months is available to rent. So I cannot collect rental income on the entire 3 years, even though that's a 3-year plan. First 18 months, I collect nothing. I'm busy building. So when I'm done, I start renting. But I cannot be renting out every unit on day one. So it's called a ramp up. That means ramps up, right? So the first month I only rent out to 10%. The second month I rent another 20%. So eventually I will reach the 94% benchmark, which is called stabilization. So now my property is stabilized, then I can sell, right? So the total income is this, and the return on equity is 57% in 3 years. Now, how did I get the 57%? I take the total income and divide by the equity that I put in. If you remember, the equity is not 50 million. The equity is only 12.5 million. So I made, how did I mention it? 5.7, right? No, 7.1. Okay, so I made 7 million out of 12. And that's why the return is so high. So if I divided it over 3 years, it should be, I believe this, not right, it's 19.1. Yeah, it's 57 divided by 3. So it's 19, that's a typo. So I'm getting a almost 20% return on the money. Okay, now that's called a project IRR. Because the project IRR has to be split between the GP and LP, and GP in this case take a greater share. So because the GP gets paid for his or her talents, so the LP's return is diluted. Okay, so if you do the spreadsheet, in this particular case, the LP return is only 15% per year, not the 19. 19 is the project return, and only 15% IRR was flow through to the LP. The rest is the GP's reward. So that's a quick case study. So last I want to say is, okay, let's say you're sold, you think it's a good idea, at least you want to start considering. So what to look for, okay? First, you want to research your ideal fund. This is the same as mutual fund again. There's many, many different mutual funds. You want to find the right one. Okay? Now, how do you find the right one? You can start by looking at past performance. Okay? Past performance does not guarantee future performance. We have that big bold letter in our disclosure. Okay? But on the other hand, if I've been smart for 20 years, more likely I'll be as smart in the year 21. So that's always a good starting point. Okay? Understand the fund's cost. Every fund costs money to manage. So there's a management fee. Again, the same as mutual fund, you have to look at the fee. So you don't want to make a lot of money, but too much of them goes to the manager, like me. So I sure wouldn't mind. Okay. So, and then understanding the portfolio. So the portfolio is what's inside the fund. Do you like apartment? Do you like retail? Do you like hospitality? That's something you can choose. So that's basically a quick rundown of the private equity. So I'm going to take some questions if we have a little bit of time. But before the question, I just want to say one thing. The purpose today is to introduce an alternative way of investing in real estate. If you join a private equity fund, typically the fund does not invest in a $3 million property or $5. In our fund, we have a soft floor of $50 million. So I do not look at any property that's under $50 million. Now, why? Because I get paid by the investor. If I spend the same amount of time to evaluate a $10 million property and a $50 million property, and I cannot possibly make the same amount of money, but you have to pay me the same fee. So that's not fair, and that's not good. It hurts my performance. So that's why we typically invest in larger real estate property. Okay, so if anyone has a question, please let me know. Yes, go ahead.
What is the tax implication?
Okay, good question. Yeah, the tax implication is exactly the same as you do on your own, because basically you're a fractional owner of the property. So you have the capital gain, you have the ordinary income, right? So if you invest in a fund that does at least a medium term holding, 3 years, 5 years, you will have rental income. So that rental income is passive, is passed through, right? So that if there is a loss, you cannot deduct. It is a passive loss, right? But all the incomes are deductible. Passive income. So it's taxable as ordinary income. Now, when we exit, it's a capital gain. Also, just to throw this in, there's a lot of OZ funds around. That's opportunity zone. So the opportunity zone fund will pass through all the opportunity zone benefit to its fund, to its investor as well. So I hope I answered that question. Yes. Anybody else? Yes, please.
So what's the difference in investor, your private fund, and with the investor, the real estate investment trust?
I see. Good question. Basically, there's from an investment standpoint, there is no difference. A REIT, as you just mentioned, is called Real Estate Investment Trust, is just a tax preferred vehicle. So there is definitely tax benefit. The reason a small firm like mine does not get involved in REITs is REITs has a lot of compliance around it. Right? Also, for the start, is the REITs requires over 100 shareholders. Right, or more, right? So my funds typically have 3 to 5, 10, so I can't qualify. So REITs also have a higher overhead because in order to manage 100 people and their money, and also they have redemption requirements, so the overhead is higher. Then it just means a cost. So, but to answer your question from an investment angle, there's very little difference. Now, REITs investor does get a little bit of tax benefit. Yeah, sure.
Do you need to be an accredited investor to invest in your fund? And what is an accredited investor?
Sure. That's a good question. My assistant was going to put it in, but I said, well, you know, I don't want to go too deep. But the short answer to the the AI accredited investor is $1 million net worth, right? Excluding your primary residence, right? Now, in my fund, I always require AI certification, okay, as accredited investor. Our attorney said some of our fund and assets class are not necessarily required to be an accredited investor, but I just feel more comfortable to have that. But to be an accredited investor, there's many different ways to do it. The easiest way is you can do a self-declaration or self-certification. So basically, in plain English, is I ask you, and you say you are, and you sign the paper in blood, then you're good. All right? I take your word. Okay? I don't have to check you. Now, there is certain limitation of how much and what kind of asset. So that's all spelled out in the SEC regulation. But to answer your question, it is our internal policy to require all AI certification. As far as exactly, does every fund that needs to be an AI investor? I think I'll defer that question to my counsel. I don't know. But to be on the safe side, I protect myself. Well, thank you very much for your time and attention, and hopefully you learned something today. If you have any question, feel free to come to me, and if you want a copy of the slide, just share your email through the organization, and I'll make sure I send it to you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Now, I'm just going to, before our